Paul Newman's blue eyes were almost too bright to believe. When he first stepped into Hollywood in the 1950s, casting directors didn't know what to do with him. Some thought he looked more like a model than an actor. Others whispered that a man this handsome could never be taken seriously on screen. But Paul Newman was not here to smile and look pretty. He wanted danger. He wanted roles that broke rules. He wanted to prove that Hollywood was not ready for what he carried inside him. From his earliest auditions, Newman showed he had something that scared the studios: unpredictability. He could be charming one second, then turn cold and dangerous the next. His voice carried a sharp edge, and his body language was impossible to read. Executives knew audiences would either love him or fear him, but no one could ignore him. This is why critics started calling him a dangerous actor. He didn't play the Hollywood game. While other stars were carefully polished into safe, marketable figures, Newman refused. He chose broken characters, rebels, outlaws, and men who never fit into society. He was not interested in heroes. He was interested in truth, and truth in Hollywood was dangerous. Even before his biggest films, Newman was stirring up trouble. Directors complained he was too intense, too serious, too focused on details, but others saw genius. One casting agent famously said, "If we unleash him, he'll change what it means to be a movie star." That prediction came true. Paul Newman was about to take Hollywood by storm, but not in the way the studios wanted. He wasn't safe. He wasn't predictable. And soon the world would discover that behind the blue eyes was a fire that made him one of the most dangerous actors classic Hollywood had ever seen. Paul Newman exploded onto the big screen with roles that defined rebellion. He didn't play the clean-cut men who got the girl and lived happily ever after. Instead, he chose characters who lived on the edge, men society tried to control but could never cage. In The Hustler, 1961, Newman played Fast Eddie Felson, a pool hustler chasing greatness. He wasn't a hero. He was selfish, reckless, and cruel at times. But audiences couldn't look away. Newman made people root for a man who didn't deserve it. That was dangerous. Hollywood liked stories with clear good guys and bad guys. Newman blurred those lines until you couldn't tell the difference. Then came HUD, 1963. Newman played a selfish cowboy who cared about nothing but himself. Critics were shocked. The studio worried audiences would hate him. Instead, people loved him more. Newman proved that charm mixed with cruelty could be irresistible. He was showing the dark side of the American dream, and audiences wanted more. With Cool Hand, Luke, 1967, Newman fully cemented himself as the rebel of his generation. Luke was a prisoner who refused to break, no matter how much punishment he took. His famous line, "What we've got here is failure to communicate," became a cultural landmark. The movie was more than entertainment. It was a statement about authority, rebellion, and freedom. And Paul Newman was its fearless symbol. By the late 1960s, Newman was not just a star. He was a legend. He stood for every man who didn't fit in, every dreamer who refused to bow, every fighter who challenged the system, and that made him dangerous. Not only to Hollywood, but to the image of America itself. Paul Newman's danger was not just in the characters he played. It followed him off screen, where Hollywood expected silence and obedience. Newman gave them the opposite. He was bold, outspoken, and unafraid to use his fame as a weapon. During the 1960s, America was divided. The Vietnam War raged on. Civil rights were being fought for in the streets, and Hollywood stars were expected to stay quiet. Paul Newman refused. He spoke out against the war. He marched for justice. And he put his money where his mouth was. This made studio executives nervous. A leading man was supposed to sell tickets, not stir controversy. But Newman wasn't afraid to lose fans if it meant standing for what he believed in. The FBI even kept a file on him. He was listed as a possible subversive because of his outspoken views. In fact, when President Richard Nixon made a list of enemies, real people he thought were dangerous to America, Paul Newman's name was right there. Imagine that. One of Hollywood's most beloved actors officially declared an enemy of the White House. That is the kind of danger few stars would dare to embrace. But Newman's rebellion didn't stop with politics. He also broke Hollywood traditions. While many actors chased fame, wealth, and luxury, Newman lived differently. He stayed married to Joanne Woodward, one of the few examples of lasting Hollywood love. He avoided the spotlight when he wasn't working, often retreating into race car garages or charitable projects. This rejection of Hollywood's shallow lifestyle only made him more powerful. He proved you could be a star without selling your soul. And then came his greatest act of danger. He used his fortune not to build mansions, but to create change. Newman founded Newman's Own, a food company that gave away 100% of its profits to charity. Over the years, it donated hundreds of millions of dollars. In a town built on greed, Newman showed that generosity could be revolutionary. Paul Newman wasn't dangerous because he broke laws or lived recklessly. He was dangerous because he couldn't be controlled. Hollywood couldn't control him, politicians couldn't silence him, and fame couldn't corrupt him. He stood as proof that a man could have power and still keep his soul, and that made him one of the most dangerous actors classic Hollywood would ever know. Hollywood stars were expected to sip champagne at glamorous parties. Paul Newman preferred the roar of engines and the smell of burning rubber. Acting gave him fame, but racing gave him freedom. And just like on screen, Newman brought danger wherever he went. His love for speed began while filming Winning 1969, a movie about auto racing. What started as research quickly became obsession. Newman didn't just drive for fun. He trained, he competed, and he risked his life on the track. By the 1970s, he was a respected professional race car driver, winning national championships and racing against men who had devoted their entire lives to the sport. Hollywood was horrified. Studios worried that their leading man might get killed in a fiery crash between movies. Insurance companies refused to cover him when he signed onto films, terrified that his dangerous hobby would end in disaster. But Newman didn't care. Racing wasn't about thrill-seeking. It was about focus, discipline, and living life without fear. His racing career became legendary. At 47 years old, Newman entered the 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the toughest endurance races in the world. Most drivers retire before that age, but Newman not only competed, he finished second. Later, in his 70s, he became the oldest driver to win a professional race. When asked why he kept pushing himself, he simply said, "I don't have a big problem with mortality, but I do have a big problem with boredom." This mindset, choosing danger over comfort, was the same one that fueled his acting. On screen, he never played it safe. Off screen, he lived by the same code. Newman proved that the spirit of rebellion wasn't just an act. It was who he truly was. Friends said that racing gave him peace because it was the only place where fame didn't matter. On the track, no one cared about his blue eyes or his movie posters. All that mattered was speed, skill, and survival. That's where Paul Newman felt most alive. And once again, he showed Hollywood that he could not be tamed. He wasn't just dangerous in front of a camera. He was dangerous behind the wheel, rewriting the rules of what a movie star could be. By the 1980s, Paul Newman was no longer just an actor. He was an institution. But instead of using his fame for vanity, he used it to build something rare in Hollywood: trust. While many stars spent their careers protecting an image, Newman seemed to grow more dangerous with age because he cared less about reputation and more about truth. His performances matured into something extraordinary. In The Verdict, 1982, he played a washed-up lawyer searching for redemption. There were no fast cars, no flashy smiles, just a man drowning in failure and doubt. The role earned him one of his many Academy Award nominations, and critics declared it one of his finest performances. He proved that aging didn't make him weaker. It made him more fearless, more honest, more human. Then came The Color of Money, 1986, where Newman reprised his role as Fast Eddie from The Hustler. This time, he wasn't the reckless young hustler anymore. He was older, sharper, more dangerous in his calm control. That performance finally won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. Yet, in true Newman fashion, he accepted it with humility, even joking that it only took the Academy 30 years to notice. But Newman's real power wasn't in trophies. It was in the way he lived. While Hollywood chased box office numbers, he built Newman's Own into a global brand that donated every penny of profit to charity. Schools, camps, hospitals, and children's programs thrived because of his vision. By the time of his death, his foundation had given away more than $500 billion. This was a different kind of danger, the danger of influence. Newman showed that a movie star could be more than a face on a screen. He showed that kindness could be powerful, that generosity could shape the world, and that success meant nothing unless it lifted others. To Hollywood, he was still a rebel. He didn't seek endless roles, he didn't chase fame, and he didn't cling to the spotlight. Instead, he created a life where art, love, and giving back all held more weight than celebrity. That rejection of everything Hollywood stood for made him stand out even more. And so, Paul Newman became untouchable, not because of wealth or scandal, but because he lived by his own rules. That is what made him truly dangerous. When Paul Newman passed away in 2008, Hollywood lost more than a movie star. It lost a symbol of everything unpredictable, honest, and untamed. The word dangerous had followed him throughout his career, but by the end of his life, that danger had transformed into something larger. It was no longer about the roles he played or the risks he took. It was about the way he lived, the way he refused to bend. Newman's legacy is a strange one because it cannot be packaged neatly. He was the heartthrob who hated being defined by his looks. He was the rebel who became an icon. He was the Hollywood star who built one of the greatest charitable empires in American history. He was a devoted husband who stayed married for 50 years in an industry famous for broken homes. And he was the race car driver who outran not just opponents, but time itself. What made him dangerous was not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was that he exposed truths people didn't want to see. He showed audiences the flaws in heroes, the cruelty hidden inside charm, and the struggle of men searching for meaning. On screen, he dared to make people uncomfortable. Off screen, he dared to live authentically, no matter the cost. You can measure his success in box office numbers, in awards, in championships on the track. But his true success is measured in the children's camps that still operate today because of his donations, in the families lifted up by his generosity, and in the artists who continue to follow his example of choosing honesty over safety. In a Hollywood where so many stars come and go, Paul Newman still feels alive. His movies remain timeless because they carry his spirit, sharp, restless, unafraid. His blue eyes may have been what first drew the world's attention, but it was the fire behind them that kept it. Paul Newman was not dangerous because he broke rules recklessly. He was dangerous because he lived a life that proved you could be powerful without being corrupted, famous without being hollow, and legendary without ever losing your humanity. And that, more than any role, any race, or any award, is the reason Paul Newman remains the most dangerous actor of classic Hollywood.